Britner Griner makes a promise while standing up for equal pay, what the basketball player is saying about her future. Plus, driving equality in the padlock inside one man's plan to assemble the first 50% male and 50% female team in Formula One. And building back equality, we'll talk with one expert who shares what needs to be done to close the pay gap for women's sports. Welcome to Advocate Today. I'm Aaron Dean. The organizers of the Madrid Open are apologizing for its mistreatment of women's tennis players. Players accuse the Open of not letting the women's doubles winners a chance to address fans at the end of the match. It is customary for players to speak to the crowd after high-stakes matches. Organizers are also being accused of sexism. Ball girls are dressed in crop tops and skirts for the women's double finals, but were dressed in long pants for the men's final. WNBA star Britner Griner says that she will never play basketball overseas again after spending months in Russian detention. Griner says her only overseas trip would be for Team USA at the Olympics. Griner spent almost 300 days in Russian prison for packing cannabis oil in her luggage. Griner was playing basketball in Moscow because the pay is better abroad. Griner is continuing her WNBA career with the Phoenix Mercury this season. Despite some recent advancements for equality in women and girls sports, there are still many disparities and biases that are haunting progress. For a deeper look at this, I spoke with Anna Goorevich. She's a graduate research fellow at the Tucker Center for Research on Girls and Women in Sports at the University of Minnesota. And a lot of times when these sporting events, we see, let's take, for example, soccer. Sometimes women's soccer events don't get as much money pumped into them by the leagues or the advertisers as the men's sports do. And as we know, the women are usually much better than the guys anyway. But, I mean, that's just facts. But, what can be done to make sure that women's sports get that same publicity, that same money, and that same support as these men's sports do?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's really kind of this chicken and egg argument. So we've been told for so long that, sports media companies, they won't promote women's sports because people aren't interested. But how can people be interested in women's sports if they don't even know what's out there, if they don't even know it's visible? Sports, turn on ESPN and all day we see men's sports, and the numbers kind of around the data of women's coverage in sport hovers around 4 to 5% of on ESPN Sports Center of women's coverage of sports. So yeah, it's a huge problem, and it kind of prevents the growth and visibility of women's sports because we're kind of, really constrained by the sport media decisions. And so I think ways to alleviate that is one, I think we've seen in the Final Four this past in March and April, just the immense media coverage and the immense attention that players like Caitlin Clark and LSU were getting in women's sports. And so the audience is there and people want to watch women's sports. And so I think it's really on sponsors calling out the invisibility of women's sports and media companies putting women's sports on in the most profitable spots and where they get the most visibility and kind of the most high action times in the prime time spots. And also a lot of social media work has been done to kind of advocate for just the fact that there's women's sports fans out there. And there's so many people that don't know they're women's sports fans yet, that especially out of this World Cup, hopefully when we see more broadcasting and more attention these next coming months, hopefully we'll turn a lot more people into women's sports fans.
And of course, Anna, I grew up playing sports, and did you as well?
Yeah, I played soccer.
A lot. So wow, so did I. That's so cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
So a lot of athletes, they got their start as children. So when it comes to youth sports, what can parents, what can these recreation leagues do at that stage of life and at that point to help better the future when it comes to equity amongst these sporting leagues?
Yeah, that is one of the $1 million questions, I think. I think just let kids be kids, first of all. So often kind of our American sport culture, there's so much pressure put on kids to specialize in sports early, to perform at really high levels really early. And I think what that does is that we don't let kids get the opportunity to really fall in love with sport and to really find the sport that works best for them, to also obtain the social, the developmental, the psychological benefits that sport brings. And so I think in some ways, especially when kids are really young, just taking the competition out of it is totally okay. And taking away the pressure of that you have to get an NCAA scholarship to that the only purpose of sport is to get NCAA scholarships and to become a professional athlete, because there's so many other benefits that sport brings. And so I think really just taking the pressure off of kids, and also challenging kind of our preconceived notions around youth sport and around gender and sport generally, and using programs like Coaching Her, for instance, to help promote that, where we can dismantle these gender biases and expectations that we have around sport. And so I think also giving access to it comes back to visibility of professional sport leaders, so things like giving opportunities to watch the NWSL and having that on TV, to show kids that in all your identities, you can become a professional athlete and succeed, and that there are opportunities for you to be treated as professional athletes, which for a long time, women's athletes have not been. And so I think we're entering a new era where we can see generations of young girls finally see for the first time, oh, that can be a career for me, where I feel equally as valued and supported like men athletes have for decades. So I think we'll see some really great new generations coming up, and in terms of just becoming leaders and advocates for gender in sport.
You have helped launch an organization called Coaching Her. What is the mission, of Coaching Her, and what work is being done to address issues in sports and equity?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm so glad you brought up Coaching Her. It's something that we launched just this past March in collaboration with Nike. It's something we've been working on for the past 3 years, the Tucker Center. And Coaching Her is essentially an online global coach education tool that's completely free for anyone to use. And the mission of it is to eradicate gender stereotypes and gender biases in coaching. And so growing up in this gendered sport world, we are all kind of accustomed to these gender stereotypes and conceptions about gender in sport that permeate our coaching behaviors, and things that we don't even realize that we're doing. Things that girls, maybe I can't push girls as hard as I can push boys because they're weaker, and these different stereotypes that we could subconsciously speak about and coach with. And so the goal of this program is to help coaches unlearn those stereotypes and biases, and then learn tools to make more welcoming, more inclusive sports spaces for women and girls across all sports and across the world, really. And so you can access that on coachingher.com completely free. So that's one area that the Tucker Center works with, especially, is coaching, gender equity in coaching spaces, gender equity for girls' participation in sports, and the connections between coaching and participation. We also do a lot on the business of women's sports, sport media. We do it all, really. And we're really excited about Coaching Her, and that's kind of our biggest project right now. But yeah, there's tons of things that are going to be coming up in this World Cup around coaching and gender and coaching and equity, and who's kind of in these leadership positions, menstruation in sports, pay equity, of course. And so it's a really exciting world to be in kind of the sports research space. And there's so many things that we've been working on to promote gender equity in sport.
Well, the White House wants to help close the gender pay gap. The Biden administration is proposing regulations to prevent previous salary consideration at federal agencies. Previous salary consideration is a large factor that is impacting the pay gap. It does not take into account the competencies of the person applying for the job. Women, and especially minority women, are regularly underpaid compared to their male counterparts. Only 21 states currently prohibit or limit the extent that employers can look into salary history. And last up today, Formula One has seen a rise in popularity in the US, and there is now a plan in place to bring on a new team that is 50% women and 50% men. Former British American racing founder and CEO Craig Pollock has been working for 4 years on this vision. The project is called Formula Equal, and it aims to deliver and build opportunities for women at all levels of the sport. Pollock hopes to debut the team in 2026 as the governing body of F1 will open new team applications from 2025 to 2027. And that's all the time that we have for this Advocate Today. Visit us online at advocatechannel.com or wherever you stream your content. I'm Aaron Dean, and we will see you next time.